I'm glad that you are here to participate. Make sure you have a pen and paper and take notes, because she's going to give us some practical things that we can be doing. So with that said, I'm going to turn the time over to Nicole. And oh, I didn't say, if you open your chat box and make sure it's to all panelists and attendees, you're welcome to leave questions there, or if you can put them in the Q&A. And wherever they go, Nicole and I will see them, and we'll make sure that all of your questions get answered by the end of class. So, but if they come to you mid-class, go ahead and put them in so you don't forget. Okay, that being said, we're going to go ahead and have Nicole take over. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. What a fun introduction. I love that. I keep meaning to play it again and take some notes because I like how you do that so well. I wanted to ask you too, Sarah, if we can make it a possibility that people can unmute themselves and respond if they like. I have a couple points in there. Maybe I thought I'd kind of just ask if people want to speak too.
Yes, we can do that. And so as you, so right now, I'm going to say to the attendees, nobody's on camera and you're all muted, but I do have the ability to unmute you. So what we'll do is you have a way to raise your hand. And so when Nicole asks questions, and if you want to participate, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll go through and unmute you. You do not have to do that. It's just if you want. So yeah, we can test that out today. Okay, does that make sense, Nicole?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Jennifer, I tried to type in there and I hit the wrong button. You can put a Q&A in. What's Shift's website? It's shiftgathering.com.
Shiftgathering.com.
Right. Sorry, I meant to type it and I cleared it. So
yeah, okay.
To address that verbally so it didn't go away. Okay. Today, this is a course, again, that could take a 4 or 8 hour workshop or a long time if we really wanted to. To keep it to an hour, I'm kind of doing a high level thing, and then I've got worksheets that I can send you that you can kind of go through some of this stuff on your own time. But I'd like to take this time to go through how to design create your designer relationship, really, like design the relationship of your dreams. This is a question I get a lot, like, I'm single, how do I find the person I want? Or I hear people talking like, just wait for them. I think there's a lot more we can be doing. And so I'm going to go through and talk about what to do and how and why and all that fun stuff. And like always, if you have questions, we can type them in the chat. When I make my screen full, share my full screen, I can't always see the chat. So Sarah can translate a little bit, or I'll just come back to it towards the end. But there's a couple spots in here too. I'll stop and check in and ask some people to respond. Looks like we already have a question. Thank you. See, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. Creating your dream relationship. Okay, this one is one that I have some firsthand experience with as well. And I like to share kind of personal stories so that people can connect in with what this process looks like in real life, and also why I feel like I am qualified to talk about it. Some of you have followed my story, some of you are brand new, but I spent about 7 years in a relationship where some abuse existed. Gosh, it's hard to say. And we were separated for like 2 years, and then finally divorced and moved now a year ago. And the reason that I mention that is because it's really important that we take some time to look at our past relationships when we're creating our future ones. So, and I'll get to that in the process here of why and what kinds of things to look at. But I realized as I was processing and grieving and healing through this relationship that I had created a pattern. I created a pattern of partners that I was attracted to, that I had sought out to try to heal some things. And when I really surrendered to all the emotions, what came forward was a story of feeling like I was never good enough. Like for my own parents, I couldn't be perfect enough. I couldn't be good enough. And how that ended up playing out in my relationships is that I found people who were overwhelming with love right off the bat, which is a red flag, by the way. We like to be loved. We like to fall into this idea of like the romance and the fairy tale of falling heavily in love. And you miss all these things, all these warning signs. Maybe you haven't stopped and looked at what your deal breakers are, right? And we're going to talk about non-negotiables. And then by the time you start to come back around out of this euphoria and things start to get kind of real, you're already in love, right? And then it becomes, well, but I love them. So I didn't want to repeat this pattern. So after my husband and I has been separated, a year and a half later, I dated another guy. This would have been last summer. And quickly I found the same patterns happening. And I was like, what am I doing? And it was excruciating because I thought I had this fresh start. I had this fresh person. We were madly in love, all these things. And I love love. I love to be in love, right? It's fun. It's exciting. It's enthralling. And I wanted to revel in that. And when the reality started becoming clear that there were some, behaviors again that were like really not healthy for us together, I was like, oh man, don't make me do this again. Like, don't make me give this up again. And I knew I needed to. It wasn't getting better. And in the grief of this, the process I personally went through was, how did I miss it again? What is it about these people that I am falling for and that I'm missing, right? And I've read all the books and I've, taken all kinds of courses and psychology theory on, narcissists and addicts and codependents and empaths and all these different things, right? And I thought I got it. And then I ended up back in this thing again. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? And I realized that was what I was falling for, was that big, heavy, massive overwhelm of emotion, right? And it just wraps you up and it feels so fun for a while. And then there's little things that come up and you're like, oh, but it's so much better when it's good, that I'm willing to overlook these things. And you end up just sitting there like spinning and spinning. And I really had to stop and break it down and just be like, I'm done with this cycle. I'm done falling into these traps. I'm done needing somebody so badly that I'll take anybody, right? I had to be okay with being alone. And that sounds cliche, right? Everybody talks about that. Be okay being alone. But it really was. It was really like, I would rather be alone and until I can find this dream relationship that we're going to talk about, or I don't want it. Right? And so I really had to sit down. Okay, what are the parts of me that I need to look at and I need to heal so that I stop falling for these and attracting these personality types? And then what is it that I want? Absolutely 100% non-negotiable. What do I want? And I did a lot of work. There was a lot of emotional processing, a lot of soul searching, a lot of digging. And I made a list. I was really intentional, very clear, very detailed. And we'll talk about all the little nuances of this, but put it into the universe, packed my little list away and went, okay, now I'm very clear and I'm happy right where I am because I don't want to go through this stuff again until something that meets this criteria comes along, or a significant portion, right? And now I'm about 5 months, I guess, into a phenomenal relationship with an absolutely incredible person. And the stuff that we've done together, the dynamic and synergy, because of all these qualities that are really healthy and positive, has helped unwind and heal a lot of the other stuff too. So not only do I have this great relationship, I'm a better person overall. And if things didn't work out with us, that would be unfortunate, but I'm not so desperate to be together and be loved that I'm going to hang on to something that doesn't work. So with that said, I'll start my screen share here. Where is it? Here it is. It always takes me a minute to figure out where my presentation is. Okay, designing the relationship of your dreams. Okay, so there's 4 main steps here we're going to cover. I kind of went through that when I talked about my own story, which is part of why I do that. Knowing yourself, right? Knowing who you are, you know, strengths and weaknesses, totally honestly, is the very first step into manifesting a relationship. Sounds kind of counterintuitive sometimes, but it's really important. Create your vision, right? That's the part where you sit down and really visualize what you want. Live as if. This is law of attraction stuff, and it's really nifty, so we'll get to that. And then check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? That's a check-in. I'm going to get into further detail with all these. So the first step, know yourself, self-reflection. Now, in the worksheets that I'll send Sarah, I've broken all these down. So if you don't catch it all on my slides, that's fine. But there's some key things to really look at when you're reflecting on yourself. And these are details that are critical in making sure that when you move forward, you're moving into something that not only is an improvement, break cycles, but is actually healthy, right? We don't want to just improve or do better, less sucky than the last one. We want to have a healthy, solid relationship. And so reflecting on your own self, and let's break these down a little bit. Roles and expectations. Sometimes these we don't see, and that's why I put them on here and on the worksheet, because it's important to look at. What roles do you play? Where did you learn them? Do they feel right? Roles can be things like codependence. It can be things like a caretaker, or I tend to be the one that is the planner, or the one that handles all the things, or I kind of just wait to be told what to do, or I like to create the ideas, or I'm the adventure planner, right? There could be a million things in here, and they could be working for you or not. One of the things that wasn't working for me is being codependent, which is a term that basically means I'm willing to put others' needs before my own. And what that cycle did for me is left me feeling unfulfilled, unhappy, unloved. And my partner didn't have a reason to take care of themselves because I was doing it, right? And that's important to know here when we're going through this process. And where did you learn them? I mean, there's a million different places we learn those things. That's a pretty common one. Society. My parents played these roles. You know, TV shows, your friends, really looking down the line at all the relationship modeling is a big one too, because I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a healthy relationship. And that was really crazy. Like, how do you know how to create one if you haven't seen one? Right? And the first step in that is part of this. Where did you learn these habits? Do they feel right? Well, no, they don't feel right, because that ended up being an empty emotional cycle. So if we know something doesn't work for us, then we have an idea of how to move forward or where to start. And the more that we can close some of these open doors, or heal, or move forward, or grow, or whatever languaging we like to use there, the more that we are going to be attractive to a better partner as well. And we're going to feel better inside, and we're going to feel more joyful and enthusiastic, and our energy is going to radiate. Expectations. This one's tricky. A lot of people don't like to admit these ones out loud, just like to write them, because I think a lot of us have ideas that we don't think we should, but they play a part. Right? So I expect men to do things like this. I expect women to do things. A lot of times we get into these subconscious cycles where we're like, well, all women do is ghost, right? They don't respond to messages. They always just disappear. If you have that belief subconsciously, you're going to act from that space, and you're going to respond to prospects from that space. So the only people that are going to attract are people that match that same energy level and that same belief set, right? So you have to identify these things and be realistic about it. To be like, I expect men to be bossy, then I'm always going to go in defensive, right? Or pushy or something. Or I have to ask permission to do things. Like those are going to create a dynamic based on my beliefs that may not even be real. Do I have any questions yet? Nope. Okay. Patterns and beliefs. Did you marry your mother or father? Oh my gosh. Again, this one's so cliche because I never would have thought that I married my father. I went so far the other way with my first marriage. The second one, it didn't occur to me. I was like, I'm past that cycle. I totally married my father the second time around. And it clicked to me one day when my dad called me and snapped at me and said something like almost the same verbatim thing that my ex-husband had said. And I was like, oh, I am repeating this pattern. I'm putting my husband in the place of my father to try to heal that, right? And that's an unfair dynamic in a healthy relationship with healthy people, because what I'm doing is I'm not only expecting him to treat me the way my father does and responding from that place, but I have needs that aren't his, right? I need my dad to treat me a certain way that may be different from what I need from my husband. And so if I'm walking into that with those subconscious things, we're doomed, right? We're bound to fight and have disagreements and upset feelings because I'm like, but I needed you and you weren't there. And it's like, but what? Hold on. And it's because I have a belief that I need him to heal that wound. So really looking at your parents and the roles that they play and their behavior patterns, and look at their relationship and go, am I mirroring this? Am I learning things? Or even the opposite can be a coping mechanism too. You're like, oh, I don't like that, so I'm going to do the complete opposite. That may not be a genuine decision. That may be the same kind of coping mechanism. Sorry about that. Dang it. Okay, characteristics keep popping up. Again, this is a cycle thing. This applies to more than relationships. I feel like anytime we start to see patterns, this is happening again. Why does this always happen to me? Every single time I do this, every single relationship, every single man, every single person I date, stop and hear that as a message coming through, right? Hear that as like the world trying to get a point across to you that you're missing. And go, okay, there's a cycle here. I've seen this 3 different times. There's something I need to look at. That's a message, right? If I keep finding the same type of person, it's because I'm being attracted to those people, or I am attractive to those kind of people. And a lot of times this is relatively subconscious. So we have to make it conscious in order to shift it. Knowing your triggers. This will come with the first couple of steps and then these, right? Because you start to see these patterns and usually those things lead to the triggers if you're not already aware of them. Things like, the way that this person talks down to me, every guy I find is somebody that's willing to just call me names and talk down to me when he's mad. And you're like, okay, so that's something that I know triggers me because I'm so tired of it, right? That when it happens, I'm like, bleh! And I just like explode. Knowing those things not only can help you heal and shift and tell you where to do your work, but it's also an amazing communication point later in a relationship to say, hey, just so you know, I'm a little sensitive around that. Can we not joke about that thing? And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Right? And that's how we can move forward and maintain a healthy relationship, even if those things aren't fully healed. Beliefs, these ones we could talk all day about. There are a lot of beliefs that are confirmed by society in general, and a lot of stories that are played out. I mean, I was watching Beauty and the Beast the other day with my daughter, and I used to love this show. And it dawned on me that we are encouraging somebody to stay, like she's to stay with this beast and love him despite his rage and just ugly anger, to turn his heart, right? And I was like, that's what I was doing. That's why I stayed. I went because I had this belief in my mind that you'll get through it, right? You love them enough, and someday we'll get through it and we'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, look at what we made it through. It's so perfect. And, you know, we don't always teach healthy communication and boundaries like that. Like, hey, you know, I can see you're pretty angry here. Is there anything I can do to help shift it? Or should I take some space? You know, a lot of the examples are here. Like, it's okay to yell at your partner. Relationship drama is a part of life. It doesn't have to be, you know, it's not, relationships aren't going to be like you always get along forever every single day. But if little things come up, there are ways of talking through them. That's like, oh, hey, that thing happened and I was a little frustrated by that. Can we talk about it? And it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize. Okay, what do we do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better that we talked about that. Thanks. Right? It doesn't have to be drama. That's a belief that we have. There is a one. Okay, this one's a big one, and a lot of people tend to really struggle to recognize that as a belief rather than a truth, because believing that there is a one for us allows us the mindset of staying in something that may not be working for us, or to stay longer than is healthy, or all these different things. So it's really important. There are a lot of different people out there. There's billions of us on this planet, and there's so many different combinations and similarities at the same time that it's pretty unreasonable to think that there's only one human that will work with you, that will match and really be a healthy, flourishing relationship with you. And if you think about it, where you've lived and where you've been in the world, and even if you've been an avid traveler, you know, how many people have you ever been in proximity with, like over your whole life, compared to how many there are on the planet? So that one's mathematically unreasonable, right? Even though sometimes our gut wants to believe in this romance of the one. Relationships I saw growing up do not affect my relationships today. I think we talked about that one. I'm like, no, I'm not marrying my dad. Oh, I am. Any questions about relationships and patterns and roles? Looks like I have a Q&A here. My mouse is nowhere to be found. Is that okay, Sarah, or should we address it? Let's see. Oh.
I can just read it to you.
Oh, okay, cool.
He says, speaking of patterns, at times I give a lot of myself, my time, my passion to people who turn out not to be that into me. Am thinking I invest too fast and instead should invest my time and passion in lesser packets. The problem, I'm an all-in kind of guy, and that feels insincere.
Yep, I understand that one, because I'm an all-in kind of person too. And I love to love big and love hard, and I don't like to hold back, and it does feel insincere, absolutely. As we go through some of this, I think we'll talk a little bit more too about how to find the middle ground, right? Between just not dating at all because it's too hard to go all in and protect yourself. You know, it's too hard to protect yourself and not be able to go all in, or to go all in and keep finding yourself in these situations that don't work. I think we're really going to address that here. That's kind of the goal. That's why we're here. So I'd love to see this plan work to help shift that cycle for you, and happy to follow up later. Yeah. So let's talk about how to do this, how to actually create this vision, right? So we've sat and we've reflected with ourselves, and we've gotten deep in there and dug out some painful stuff, right? Like, give yourself a treat, whatever your treat is, whether it's an ice cream or a glass of wine, like, you know, take a couple nights to do this. Like, you don't have to sit and cram all these things out all at once. Because the next step is the dream, right? And I don't want to create all this from the anger and pain. So if we sit over here and we're like, oh, I'm so mad at all these past experiences and relationships, and now I know exactly what I don't want. And you're like, I don't want somebody that's, you know, mean, and I don't want somebody that's bitchy, and I don't want somebody that's, you know, like Karen. And you're like creating from that space, right? So take a step away, shift your energy, come back to creating the vision. And there's a worksheet too. I mean, if it's helpful, I could just email that to you now, Sarah. But non-negotiables, those are the things I was talking about, what you must have and absolutely cannot have in a relationship. The actual vision itself, which is a lot of free flow exercise and becoming a match to your vision. I think this is the most critical part of designing your relationship and the least talked about part of it, right? So we dug into ourselves, and then we're going to create this idea of what we want. Now we have to become a match to that. And that's how we kind of do the math to put those two together. So non-negotiables, there's a worksheet. It's just a bunch of blank lines. You're going to go through and you're going to write down all the things you absolutely have to have in a relationship and absolutely cannot have in a relationship. These are some prompts. There could be a lot more. And it's divided by different categories, and I'll go through all of those. But this, again, is just prompts. Like getting really specific is important. You're going to have a lot better results if you're like, I want a relationship with somebody who volunteers a lot of their time in the community, is willing to help if somebody needs it, and responds to stressful situations with kindness. Then I want somebody that's nice. Right? So this is going to help break down a lot of those things. You don't have to answer all of them or any of them if you don't want to. They're just ideas to get this thought process going. So spiritually, that could be a religion or not. What are their practices? What are yours? Do they mesh? Do you need to be on the same page? Do you have to date somebody that is the same religion as you or isn't a religion? Is that really critical? What about children and families? Where would you get married? Where would you baptize kids? And those may not even be in the cards, but if that's a consideration for you and something that is important to you, then that's something you want to put down on your non-negotiables. Mentally, how do they respond to challenges? What motivates them, and what type of personal development do they do? I think these are really important questions as well, because I think we want people that are on the same trajectory as we are, to some extent. So we have somebody to talk to, or sometimes you might want someone that's kind of at the opposite side. You know what, I'm always out in the community, I'm always doing all these things, I'm building, growing all the time. I would love to have a partner that can chill and help me ground back at home sometimes. You know, hey, I planned us this camping trip, let's get out of town. And I'm like, oh, I never would have thought of that. That might be something you want in a relationship, or you might be like, I want somebody that's doing the same thing, that's out there building and growing and, you know, moving and shaking, right? So that's a personal decision as well. What motivates them? Are they motivated by money? Are they motivated by helping the community? Responding to challenges is a big one, because a lot of times we may miss really critical parts of somebody's true character until we see them stressed, until we see them pressured. Maybe they're out of work, maybe their parents are coming down hard on them, maybe there was a car crash, maybe, I don't know, there's a million things that stress us out all the time. Kids are bouncing off the walls, and you get somebody under stress and you see how they respond to it, and you learn a lot about people. I mean, just get in the car with them when they're late, right? You will see a side of people's personality. And so it's important to put it down on the list so that if something happens that is a deal breaker for you, you can see that, right? Because the point of making these non-negotiables is to know ahead of time what your deal breakers are. so that you don't have to think later, is that a deal breaker or not? When you're in the moment of all the chemicals and love and awesomeness is a bad time to make that decision, because you're like, well, of course, because this is fun and I love this and I want to stay, right? And then later you're like, oh, that was not something I would ever put up with. Why did I do that? So if it's like somebody responds poorly to challenges and they yell at you, you know, we want to put something down. Like I want to be with a person that handles stress kindly and calmly, you know, things like that. And positivity is an important piece, but we'll come to that later and we'll kind of tweak these in. But again, this is just kind of a free flow, like brain dump kind of exercise. Physically, how do they look? Is that important to you? Right? Sometimes this can feel superficial. So if it's not important to you, if they're tall, cool. I want it in here because sometimes that is important to people. I hear all the time that people are like, I need somebody that's tall, or I need, you know, somebody that's short like me so that I don't feel small or something. So that's an important piece. Is physical fitness and you know, hygiene and this type of thing important? How healthy are they? If you work out all the time, you probably want somebody that does, you know, or not. That may not be important to you, right? Financially, what do their finances look like? And how are they building? Pretty simple there. Sometimes people put in things like, you know, they have to have good credit, or, you know, I want somebody that has their own, you know, income. I want to kind of shift some of those into what's underlying it. So instead of saying, you know, they have good credit, you know, like they have a pattern of being responsible, right? Because credit can fluctuate, especially right now. Look at this pandemic thing. How many people have been out of jobs? Maybe they haven't been able to pay their bills a couple months, and all of a sudden the person that may have lined up for you doesn't have good credit, and you might have inadvertently, subconsciously weeded it out because you're like, well, I'm making sure to look for good credit. So just kind of look at things that are underneath finances a little bit. It's important. It's a huge part of a relationship, and you don't want to fight, but money can fluctuate for a million different reasons. You want to align on what's underneath it, what the beliefs, the financial beliefs are. And if they have the same goals and they have the same patterns financially, and if they're building and moving in the same direction, it's more important than actual dollar figures or credit scores long term. Emotionally, how open are they in a relationship? That can be, you know, how willing are they to talk about what's going on with them? How much, you know, time do they want to share? How much of their story? How much of their life and home and families and social circles, right? Do they want to share? How do they respond and connect with you? Are you an emotional priority for them, and how do they show it? These ones can be tricky to get specific on. We like to talk about feelings and just be like, I don't want to ever doubt they love me, right? Well, okay, what does that look like for you? That can be a love language thing, right? I know mine are physical touch and time, quality time. So I can easily build into this, like I want somebody that prioritizes spending time with me, right? Somebody that will enjoy the same activities I do so that we can be in the same physical space a decent amount of the time. Sexually, that can be kind of taboo, but huge, right? It's huge. How many of us figure out later we don't align sexually? And that's fine. But if we know ahead of time what to look for, then we can start having those conversations sooner. So what are their attitudes around sex and sexuality? Is it something that maybe is very much of a taboo and a nervous topic for them, and they need to like have some time to open up? Again, that's fine. But if that's something that you're wanting somebody that's quite a bit more open and flamboyant sexually, then that's important to define here. How do they feel about initiating frequency? This is one of the most common things that people will come to me for with couples sex coaching, right? They have mismatched expectations around sex. Either somebody wants the other person to initiate more and the other one's maybe just in the habit of not having to, or the libidos are mismatched, or Yeah, I mean, these are common places to not align. So again, I think it's important to understand what each other wants out of it. And then if you find somebody that you might think is worth pursuing a relationship with, and you're like, hey, how do you feel about this sort of thing? And they're like, yeah, I don't really care about sex. And you're like, oh, well, I do a lot, and we should maybe talk about that, right? Wouldn't that be better to know then than 10 years down the road and you're going, I can't make this work. Okay, so when we're creating this non-negotiable list, we're going to make a list of all the things that we want and don't want, right? In all those different areas. Then we're going to go back through and shift the language on these statements to include these 4 things: present tense, personal perspective, positive language, and passionate. Passionate's subjective again, but I think you can probably hear it in my voice when I'm talking about, like, I want somebody that responds with kindness when they're under pressure. Because that is so important to me. So if I wrote down, I don't want a jerk, I can come here and say, okay, present tense, and not I will or I was, but present tense. And part of this is the law of attraction thing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more coming up. I'm not going to get too woo on you, but there's some validity there. So trust me on this one. But the mind is really funny. It doesn't know the difference. If you believe that something exists right now and it's not actually true, your body will try to shift your life to match it. And that can go the other way. Like if you have some cognitive dissonance, something that's not a correct belief and it's an unhealthy one, you'll try to kind of warp how you see things and how you view the world to match that belief. But we can do it positively too. And it's important to harness that ability in this scenario, instead of saying, I will have a partner who is kind when they're stressed or under pressure, right? You say, I have a partner. Even if you don't have a partner now, saying, I have a partner, this is like reinforcing in your mind that this is now and it's possible. So I have a partner that is kind in these hard situations. That also gives your personal perspective, your positive language. Does anybody have questions about that? I know that can be tricky to figure out how to shift some of these things if anyone's running through examples in your head. Do we have any hands up? Cool. That's a quick one. If you just click the little button that says raise hand, if you want to talk, or if you need a minute to type something in, you want to stop me, just raise your hand. Okay, so we've gone through digging into ourselves, right? We looked at why we do the things we do, what behaviors we've brought into relationships, what wounds we've brought in that attracted some things we may not like or that weren't working for us, right? Then we took the next step to say, okay, now what do I want to be different? And we shifted it to the positive, which is how we get in the mindset of it being possible and opening up the possibility. Okay, now the last one is, and we've made our big list. Now I have this list of, like, I want somebody that's just impeccably honest, like, the kindness one, all these things, right? And you're like, cool, now what do I do with it? The first thing I want to say is, this goes into a little more detail in the worksheet, but it says basically, don't hold super rigid to every single one of these things you wrote down, because you don't want to reject somebody that's really close or maybe is moving in that direction just because one out of your 15 points didn't line up, right? So it's setting your best intention, the best thing I can hope for, and like getting the closest you can. Sometimes we can really go too far the other way with trying to not settle that we turn down some really great choices. The last part, again, I mentioned was the one that I think is the most important and the least addressed, because it's being a match to your vision. So let's say I put down that I want a rich guy that's 6'3" and completely like Chippendales buff, muscular, and has 4 yachts. And I'm not trying to make this ridiculous, but I think the extreme makes it kind of easier. But, you know, I want all these things, and he's got to be a CEO and blah, blah, blah. Okay, is that kind of person going to be attracted to me? I don't know. Right? Is that the kind of person that if I met them and I crossed their path would stop and talk to me and be interested in me? And this is hard because I don't want to say, well, no, they'd never be interested in me. But the reality is their goals and their trajectory and their ideas of what they want out of a relationship may not align with me. So if that's what I really want, do I need to look at myself and work on some new skills or shift some things in my life? Maybe I move to New York where there's corporations or something, to be in a spot where that's actually possible, right? Or am I already there? So again, it's not a matter of, well, I'm not good enough. It's just being realistic. It may be something as simple as that kind of person may not want somebody with kids, and I have 2. Like, so do I need to adjust a little bit? Okay, and again, we can come back. What am I really looking for here, right? Somebody that I'm physically attracted to, somebody that's got goals and motivation and passion and ambition, somebody that's a successful leader and has these leadership skills, right? And I may find somebody that's really awesome that meets that, and we still align. So it's important to really look at this. It's just like a business, right? Know your product, know what it is, who you are, and what your strengths are, and some of your, I don't want to say weaknesses, but maybe points where that may not align, and be honest about it. If I want somebody that's really healthy and really productive and motivated, and maybe I'm like this furious, angry person, maybe I just got out of this relationship and I'm still grieving and mad about it, right? Am I a person that's going to seem attractive to that person? They may be understanding enough to be like, hey, I know that this is temporary and you're going through stuff. Or they may be like, whoa, your energy is way off. Like, this person is just pissed off and angry all the time, and they may not even connect with you over that. So looking at that and being like, wow, if I want somebody that's really healthy and really proactive, maybe I ought to be too. What do I need to do? What do I need to let go of? What can I forgive? What kind of resentments can I move through? What kind of like processing and things can I heal and shift? So instead of waiting and feeling like I'll never find the right man, it gives us a way to move, right? It gives us a direction and an action. So we can say, okay, I might not be ready for this yet, but I'm going to do everything I can in the meantime. But I know exactly what I want. So if something else comes along, I'm not just so desperate because I'm alone, right? That I'm like, I'm healing, I'm working through this. And then when that healthy person and relationship comes along, you're like, hey, this is what I asked for. This is really cool. So being very specific about this, when we went through those previous lists, list some areas of your life to improve, to heal, to grow, to shift. It can be anything from maybe I should clean my house better, or organize my finances, or manage my time, or have more time for free things. If we spend all our time with our kids 24/7 and we don't even have time to go on a date, we're never going to find the person no matter how great they are. Patterns to stop. Again, this can be as simple as, I always wait for them to ask me out and they never do. Well, maybe that's a pattern to stop. Maybe I can be proactive and be like, hey, would you want to go have dinner with me sometime? And they might be like, holy crap. Yeah, thanks for asking. Like, I didn't know you were interested, or I didn't want to sound pushy, or whatever reason. You might get over that hurdle just because of that. So patterns you can stop. Or if there's big ones, right? You're codependent, or you're somebody that, always rescues people, or I don't know. Immediate massive actions. This sounds like a big deal, right? And it kind of is. The point here is the actions to take, the steps. And it doesn't have to be a big giant plan, right? I'm going to do this for 3 months and then I'll go here and do this. But the next thing, hey, maybe I need to go to counseling for a while. That's massive. That's a big thing in our lives. That's telling yourself, your psyche, your subconscious, and the universe that you're ready to move forward and heal and grow and shift some things. And that opens up a world of possibilities. As soon as we stop sitting in our box of, I know exactly what life looks like, and we go, okay, something different is possible, we open our mind to all these other things that we might not have been seeing. So that is massive in that regard. Could be something as simple as I need to shift my job, but that's massive, right? Again, I don't have enough free time to even date. Maybe I set up a night that I trade with another friend or something for kids. Like every Wednesday for Thursday, we trade kids. I don't know. That's massive. It's simple, but big, because now you have a free night every week. What are you going to do with it? Right? You're going to get out. You're going to meet people. You're going to go places. You're going to hike. You're going to read books. You're going to take a bubble bath. I don't know. Clean your car out. Balance your checkbook. You're going to do something somewhere that probably needed done. And that's massive. And then living as if. So I've been touching on the law of attraction for a while. The law of attraction basically states that the energy you put off is what you attract back. And that's more than just pretending, right? I'm going to pretend like I'm happy. If I walk into this meeting with this client and I just, hi, how are you today? That's great. He's going to feel that energy. They may not be trained enough to consciously see it and be like, okay, this person is bullshitting me. But they will feel that energy and they'll either shift theirs to match yours, assuming theirs was different, right? Which creates a different kind of dynamic, or there'll be a strain there because they're up here and they're like, oh my God, this is great. And they're just like flowing and you're like, oh, this guy's driving me crazy, right? And there's going to be a little bit of a dissonance there. The same thing happens when we're on the bus, when we're at a family dinner, when we're with our kids, let alone in social situations and relationships. So if I'm like totally overwhelmed with my kids and I'm like, I can't take it, you guys are driving me bonkers, they sense that and they feel more disconnected. And then they try harder to connect. And when they try harder to connect, they bug me more because they want to feel the closeness with me that they're used to. So then they bug me and smother me, trying to feel closer to me again. And then I'm going, oh my gosh, why are they being so much crazier the one time I am annoyed with them? And we feed the cycle of energy, right? And we do it in relationships the same way. When we walk in and we're like, you know what, this person is going to pretend to have a great first date with me. We're going to leave and I'm never going to hear from them again. I'm going to text 3 or 4 times and feel like an idiot and they're going to ghost me. And you're going to be sitting there through that whole thing. Your body language may be different, but your energy is like this, like, prove me wrong. And that on their side feels like either they're going to feel like, I don't know what's wrong with this guy, but nothing I say is like working or flowing or going, or they may have to actually step down to that level to do it. Oh, okay, here's something to prove it. Here's something to prove it. And that's exhausting to them. And it's not authentic. It's not true intimacy. That's me stepping down and feeding you energy that you aren't able to shift for yourself, and not actually my energy or my experience or yours. It would actually be better, even though it's harder, to go in and be like, I am having the hardest time dating. I keep getting ghosted and I don't know why. Like, you don't have to, I don't always recommend maybe telling people that on a date, but getting it out of the way. Like, I'm sorry if I'm weird. I'm really nervous because I'm afraid this is going to happen again. And I'm doing my best to like put that aside, but do you want to like walk around the block real quick and I'll just like work this out? Like, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Like, for me, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, you are so self-aware and willing to be vulnerable and talk about these things. Hell yeah, let's go walk around the block. Let's do it. Let's grab a drink while we're at it and talk even longer. because I know that you're aware of what's going on in yourself and you're taking responsibility to shift it rather than sitting in it and letting it affect what we could create there.
So Nicole, I'm jumping in.
Yep.
We have about 10 minutes left. So I do want to leave time for questions, and people may stay after, but I just don't know if you can see the clock. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm almost done here. I'll scoot through. Take yourself on your ideal date. So this is living as if. Again, if we believe it's possible and it's real and it's now, our energy will respond there. So if if I know my ideal partner and I know my ideal date is like to go to Fleming's for a night and dancing, right? I'm going to take myself. I'm going to go to Fleming's in my cutest outfit. I'm going to get all cute and I'm going to take myself there because first of all, I'm awesome and I like to date myself. And second of all, why not? If you live it, right? It's like going to test drive the car you want to motivate yourself to work harder. Okay, if I go drive it, oh my gosh, I want that car so bad. Now all of a sudden you want to go to work every day and you want to like put in overtime, right? It's that same thing. You go to your date, you're living as if. This is one of my favorite quotes. As far as I can tell, it's just about letting the universe know what you want and then working toward it while letting go of how it comes to pass. Jim Carrey's pretty rad. So checking yourself is just, don't stop there, right? Come back in periodically, whether it's every day or once a week. I would recommend at least once a week and just checking on it. You can look at your list. You can journal some things that came up that week. Maybe you had a couple dates, maybe you had a couple interactions, something that doesn't even have to be dating related. Just write them down, get them out, start processing, start thinking through these things. You're going to make more connections and your list can be a working document. Ta-da, I made it. Wanted to make sure I really kind of dug into law of attraction if anybody hasn't heard of that and why that works. So sorry if I took too much time, but
you didn't take too much time at all. It was great. Somebody did ask if the questions were anonymous, and if you put them in the Q&A, nobody can see who's putting them in. So you feel free to go ahead and do that. You can be as anonymous as you want to be. If you put it in the chat, it'll come up as whatever name that you entered when you entered the class. So if you want to be anonymous, I'd stick with Q&A. But either way, if you want to put your questions in, we do have a little time. And if you want to circle back to that first question that was talking about, where to give their time and how to do it without, if he doesn't go all in, he feels insecure. So.
Yep, I'll definitely circle back to that. Okay. I also just want to mention, I love questions. And so if anybody has anything like, well, this is super specific, I don't need to ask it in class or whatever, I don't care, I love them, go ahead. Speaking of patterns, at times I give a lot of myself to people who turn out to be not that into me. I'm thinking I invest too fast and instead should invest my time in lesser packets, right? So do you stop putting yourself out there, or do you shift the people you date, or just stop dating altogether until it lines up? This question, again, I think comes back to a number of things, right? If we're able to really go through that series of where am I coming from? Where are my personal wounds and coping mechanisms? Being attracted to people who may not be available or emotionally ready to go all in, right? If that's how you are and that's what you want, I want big, passionate love. First of all, know the warning signs. Be really clear on warning signs for things that are unhealthy or toxic or your personal deal breakers off the bat, so that if you do go in big, you're not blinded by it and then swept down the current, right? So have a good understanding of what to look for, and then just own that. Hey, I'm somebody that loves big and I want to find that too. And people might be like, oh my God, right? Those people that you're finding that aren't ready for that aren't going to align. And that's kind of the point of dating, is to figure out if you align or not. So there is no such thing as rejection. There is only basically being protected for something that doesn't align for you. So be like, thank you for letting me know that's not what you want, because that's what I want. And then we don't have to take time and energy to figure that out later. And just own it. What's the best way to prevent ghosting or handle it when it happens? Okay. This one is a twofold question, because there are two parts of this dynamic, and I think a lot of times people get lost in one or the other, because ghosting is a questionable emotional habit. And I say questionable, right? Because it's somebody that's not able to speak up if they're not interested, generally. But there's a reason for that. And it comes back to fear. And if I can generalize for a minute, just to kind of bring the point home, a lot of times women tend to ghost a little bit more. And well, I think both ghost, but different reasons. Women often ghost because they're afraid of reactions. And I think a lot of times people that don't understand or have compassion for why somebody might just ghost are the people who are not doing these behaviors, and so they don't see it, which is, pat yourself on the back. But a lot of times if we turn somebody down, or we have to cancel, or we have to just tell them we're not interested, we get met with a huge backlash. And they'll be like, really? Are you ridiculous? Are you blah, blah, blah? Oh my gosh. And they like, wait, or they beg, right? Are you sure? But what about this? And what about this? And it's hard. It's so hard emotionally to do that and hold that space, that a lot of times people are like, I don't have it in me right now. Right? It could also just be that something in their life picked up, or they had a, out of character situation, and they're just like, I didn't even think to go tell that person that I don't have space right now to keep dating. So the first thing I can say is don't take it personally. It's hard not to take it personal because it feels personal. But again, let's bring it back to that, like, it's just obvious that you're not in alignment. If you're in alignment, that person is going to come back and they're going to be like, hey, I haven't responded to you. I'm really sorry. Either I had something going on, or I was afraid and I want to see if you're willing to give me another shot now. And they got over that block, right? To come back to you. And another one in here, men. And I'll talk about how to handle it too. Why do men ghost? I think men ghost if they're afraid to be honest about what they want from the relationship. Sometimes it can be clear that again, people aren't aligning, and you might get a guilt trip or an emotional response, or like a, really, why? That's crazy. Or, oh, you just wanted sex. You just wanted sex from me. That's sure. Just like every typical man, right? And I don't think guys want that kind of backlash either. Or maybe they did just want sex, and maybe they did just go into it that way, and girls do that too. So I hate to generalize here. Again, I was just trying to kind of make the point that we all have reasons, and there's 100 reasons why it happens. But how to handle it, really, don't take it personally. That's something on their end, and it may very well be perfectly justified, and it may very well be not. In either case, they weren't ready to align with you, and so have gratitude. And just be like, cool, I'm glad to know that this isn't where I should continue putting my energy. And if you move your energy to something else and that's meant to align, it'll circle back around. They'll come back and be like, oh my gosh, I got caught up in this thing. I still want to connect with you. And you're like, oh, cool. Right? Hope that helps. See in the chat. I'll try to answer this last one if it's a question, and then I think we're about out of time. Mm-hmm. I love the statement that it's not rejection, it's preserving you from non-alignment. Perhaps ghosting is the most efficient form of that. Yep. Need to be efficient and not dwell on the ghost. Exactly. If we don't take these things personally, if we don't expect to find our one person every single time we go on one date, then I think it's going to shift a lot. We're literally there to figure out if we align or not. And if we don't, and they're a person that you're like, I cannot believe that person was so ridiculous, then it's just clear that we don't align. And that's perfect. You're like, sweet, I'm closer to my person that's in alignment now.
Move along. Yep. Well, thank you, Nicole. That was super helpful. And I know we're just all headed toward the most healthy, awesome relationships. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thanks again to Nicole for being here and sharing her wisdom and her experience with us. Feel free to jump on shiftgathering.com, sign up for additional classes. We will be, watch your email inbox, and I will be sending out the PDF that Nicole has prepared for us, and hope to see you in a future Shift Summit class. Thanks, everybody.
Forward that now. This stuff can get kind of rough, so if you have questions or challenges, let me know. Thank you.